Okay, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Um, this video is inshallah going to be a short video, although I can't guarantee it. It's about dialogue in order to help you try and improve your creative writing skills. So I'm immediately going to go to a share. So I'm going to my share screen, and what I will show you is what I'd like you try to do is to try and share. It's not share. Try to utilize 4 different types of speech rules. There is possibly a fifth as well. So if I get my annotate out, give me a second. Okay, so here you see this red dot. First rule, you must have dialogue in your story somewhere, and it can't be 1 or 2 lines long. Try to enhance your dialogue. Now, if you remember previously, I mentioned in a previous lesson that the point of dialogue is twofold. So if I write this down here, so dialogue, what it's supposed to do is, if we were to simplify it, is it's supposed to move your plot along, okay? But the other thing it should try to do is to kind of develop characterization. So those are the 2 things. Now, I'm not going to be talking about how to build suspense or tension, because obviously tension is something that you would want as an ingredient. I'm not going to talk about openings and closings, nor am I going to be talking about a gripping or an engaging middle. Rather, this is one element where we're looking at trying to have a range of different types of dialogue structures, I guess you could call it. So the first one, I've called it standard, and I've mentioned there's 4 speech types. So it goes like this. Somebody says something, you see the speech mark, or the end speech mark there, and the first one over here. You have to have capital letter at the beginning, and then you got your words. So inside the 2 speech marks is whatever somebody's saying. And then there's gonna be a comma, an exclamation mark, or a question mark at this point, said X, whoever the person is. And then you have to have a full stop here. So over here, it says must end with a full stop. That's straightforward. That's not usually the problem. The problem is this one here inside this box. Pick one of them, depending if your sentence is a statement, an exclamation, or a question. Note, and this is an important note, no full stop. So this is where people make a mistake. They put a full stop here. No, it's supposed to be after the person says said. Okay, what I can do is quickly, immediately go down to an example. Right over here, example number 1. My name is John, said Fred. Okay, my, capital M, name's John. Look at the comma there. This is a statement. My name is John. Said Fred, full stop, and the full stop goes there. That is your standard type of sentence. What about the non-standard? So the non-standard is this one, number 2. The difference is simply, you see the said over here, we're just switching places. So whereas the said was here, the said is now at the beginning. Personally, I don't like this type of phrasing, but sometimes in your story, it does call for it, okay? But just to mix it up, it's on this side. Now, if it is on this side, what happens? Put the comma here. So somebody said comma, and this is often missed, this comma. I wrote here must be a comma. So somebody said, John said, Fred said, whoever said, comma, open speech marks, and then it's practically the same as what you have up here. So what we could do is get this arrow, let's maybe change it to a different color. And now that whole section is there. It's the same thing. The only difference, right, is the comma goes here. And over here, there's the commas on this side. Okay, if it's a statement. Obviously, if it's an exclamation mark, you put, if it's an exclamation, you put an exclamation mark there. If it's a question, you put a question mark there. So far, so good. So we've got 1 and 2. Let me now move to 3. 3 is a different type of arrangement. Actually, before I go to 3, let me give you an example of 2. So, number 2. John said, comma, don't be daft, Fred, that's my name. Notice the capitalization of don't, because in terms of what is being said, that's the first word. Don't is the first word, and you have to capitalize the first word of whatever anyone is saying. Over here, number 1, when it says my name is John, the word my is the first thing that Fred said, and that's why M has to be capital. Even though on number 2, the word don't seems like it's in the middle of the sentence, and you're wondering, why am I putting a capital D there? Because it's in the middle. No, you have to put capital letter at the beginning of the sentence. That's why John, well, that's partly the reason why John's name is capital, but really, it's not really the reason. The real reason is names, people's names, proper nouns are supposed to be capitalized. But in terms of the sentence, what he actually said, don't be daft, that is why, because word don't is the first thing he said, you have to capitalize the first letter. So number 2, we have explained. Let's have a look at continued speech. So continued speech, which is number 3, is this part here. Let me box it so it doesn't look too confusing. And we'll do it in green. So it's this part here. That's what we're looking at. So open speech marks, capital letter, then insert the word. So this looks familiar. Then you put a comma here, must be a comma, said X, another comma here, must be a comma, open speech brackets, oh, no capital letters here, insert the words, and then you either end with a full stop, question mark, or exclamation mark, end speech mark. There cannot be any capital letters here unless it's someone's name, for instance. I put that in brackets, unless it's someone's name, because I don't want to, I'm trying not to confuse it. Okay, but I put it there because the basic rule is everybody's names should be capital letters because of it's a proper noun. So knowing that rule, which you should know since in infant school, junior school, I don't need to address that. What we do need to know is there is no capital letters here. Now, I think the best way to explain this, like why must there be a comma here? Why must there be a comma here? Okay, and why should that be no capital letters? Because it's continued speech, meaning what they said was one sentence, and he just interrupted it with the word said, whoever. Okay, so let's have a look at the example so you understand what I mean. So go down here. What I'll do is I'll get rid of the drawing thing. Okay, so 3. I'm sorry, John, said Fred. Sometimes I can't help myself. So the last part is an exclamation, fair enough. But the bit at the beginning, I'm sorry, John. And now notice, let me maybe use this one. And let's go for red. There's your comma, and there's your other comma. I'm sorry, John, said Fred. Sometimes I can't help myself. Okay, why have we put those commas there? Because if you get rid of said Fred, what Fred said is, I'm sorry, John, sometimes I can't help myself. is that it's actually one sentence. I am sorry, John. Sometimes I can't help myself. The point is that we've put said Fred in the middle just to vary the dialogue, because we tend to often, if we use the standard type, we have said Fred at the end. If we use the non-standard, you'd have John said at the beginning. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to have another type of a sentence where we want to interrupt it. We want to, it's called continued speech, right? I'm sorry, John, sometimes I can't help myself, said Fred. You could have done it that way. You could have put said Fred at the end, or Fred said, I'm sorry, John, sometimes I can't help myself. But it sometimes feels nice to put the interruption in the middle. I'm sorry, John, said Fred, sometimes I can't help myself. What this does, so the commas is there because you've inserted said Fred, so it emphasizes this is an insertion. The fact that there's a comma over here, I'm sorry, John, there's a comma there, emphasizes, right? Actually, you'd have to do that anyway. If you look at number one, look, it's at the end. My name is John. I'm sorry, John. It's the same thing. It's the same general rule. So that's not really the point. The point is the second one. If we look over here, number one, it ends with a full stop. If we look at number two, don't be John Fred, that's my name, full stop. I'm sorry, John, comma, said Fred, comma. Now, why the comma there? The reason why it's a comma there is because you're emphasizing that this second bit is continued. Okay? And that is reinforced with the uncapital letter, the lowercase, sometimes the S, sometimes lowercase, because we've just established, I'm sorry, John, sometimes I can't help myself is one sentence. So why would you randomly put a capital S for sometimes? We just established this is not a new sentence. Said Fred is just interrupting, okay, one sentence. So that is the continued speech. Now, the reason why I needed to explain continued speech because I want to show you a difference with different sentences in a speech. So you have this whole bit here. I think for this one, I'm going to go to the example first. So, oh my God, that's one sentence, exclaimed John, full stop. You're such a silly sausage. Okay, so there's a strange conversation going on between John and Fred. But the last sentence there, you're such a silly sausage, obviously is a statement, but oh my God is an exclamation, just like the previous sentence ends with a exclamation. Sometimes I can't help myself. So we've decided to say, instead of said John, we said exclaimed John. Not a problem. Oh my God, exclamation mark. Now, I'm going to ask a question. When you have an exclamation mark, right, what is that a full sentence? Generally speaking, like after the exclamation mark, do you have to begin with a capital letter? I'll give you 3 seconds to think about that. 3, 2, 1. The answer is yeah, you have to start with a capital letter. This emphasizes the fact that, oh my God, is its own sentence. And that explains why there has to be a capital Y here. Because unlike number 3, which it was one sentence being interrupted with said somebody, and that explains why you have to have the small s, because it's actually just a one sentence being interrupted. The number 4 is there's different sentences in the speech. How many sentences did John make in number 4? 2. Oh my God. And because you've got the exclamation mark, it means that whatever he says next is a different sentence. You're such a silly sausage in this case, capital Y, beginning that sentence. Good. But there's one other thing that's very important. Notice, whereas in number 3, you have the comma after said Fred. Look at number 4. It's a full stop. That full stop happens because of this exclamation mark here. Okay, if there was a question mark, what do you think happens here? A comma or a full stop? I'm going to get you to think about that. You can pause the video. I will give you the answer in 3, 2, 1. So the answer is if that was a question mark over here, again, you'll have a full stop here because anything after a question mark is another sentence, begins with a capital letter. Similarly, you'll have a capital letter here. So the only reason why that in number 3 it says sometimes in a small s is because, well, the main reason is this is one sentence. You just interrupted it. You interrupted the sentence that was said by just inserting said Fred, okay, in one sentence. And because it's one sentence, that comma there has to be a comma, and that comma there has to be a comma. That punctuation mark here has to be a comma. So I hope that's clear. And I think if you look at this, you've got A and B. I think if you look carefully, A is focusing as if it's a exclamation mark. What should I use? Exclamation mark there, whereas this is a question mark, okay? So, okay, capital letter as normal, insert the words as normal, but you've got an exclamation mark here. That differs to here where it was a comma, okay? Shouted X, full stop. Did you see? Because of this, you have to have this, okay? Then you open speech marks, then you have to have capital letter, then you have the rest of the words, full stop, question mark, or exclamation mark, end sentence, okay? So over here it says, this is essential. What is the capital letter there? Okay. Notice it over here. This is a separate point, but because I've wrote down shouted, I highlighted it because I'm trying to emphasize that if you're shouting, shouldn't there be a exclamation mark? And if there is an exclamation mark and you want to carry on the sentence, you're going to have to put a full stop here and start a new sentence over here. So it isn't actually one sentence, it's two sentences. Now, what about this one over here, B? So again, capital letter, insert the words, you've got question mark. Because of the question mark, you have to have the full stop over here to indicate that's the end of this sentence. Asked whoever. Okay. Then, because there's a full stop over there, you need to have the capital letter here. And this is essential. Okay. Where's the example? Look down here, number 4. Okay. So that's basically what I'm suggesting you should try to do in your stories. Mix it up. Now, there is a fifth one that you could do. The fifth one is when you have two people having a conversation, and once you say said Fred, and then the next one, John said. Okay, so let me just show you. So imagine number 1 is my name's John, said Fred. The number 2 is John said, don't be daft, Fred, that's my name. The third one, if we decided not to interrupt it in the middle, we could eliminate said entirely and just have the sentence. So it could look something like this. Okay, imagine that's not there. Imagine that's not there. And imagine sometimes it's closer towards the word John because it's one sentence. So my name is John, said Fred. John said, don't be daft, Fred. That's my name. I'm sorry, John. Sometimes I can't help myself. You don't even need to say said there. You don't need to do it. Okay. We don't need to say said Fred. Right. You will automatically feel like you should because you just want to make it clear that this one's Fred and that one's John and this one's Fred and this one's John. Okay. But the point is that if there's only two people speaking, it becomes apparent and clear that number 3 in this case is probably going to be Fred speaking. So that's another option. So if I were to write another option, number 5 would be Don't use he said. Okay. Now, I want to mention something, that this only works if you have two people speaking. If you have 3 or 4 people speaking, you won't be able to do it. Otherwise, it'll be very confusing. So 2 people becomes very obvious, this person speaking, then the other person speaking, and so on. And finally, just to give an example of the range of these 5 different types of sentences, I'll stop the share, which is happening right now, and I will open up a different one. Now, this you all have. I gave it to you before we broke up. I think it's called Middle and End Worksheet. This is extracts from Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. You can't see it at the moment. It's coming. Now, the first extract describes George and Lenny, and that's not really what we want to look at. The second extract, if I scroll down, before I do that, let me get my annotate. So I'm going to scroll down here. Curly's first description and conversation. Now I know with the boys I've covered this. With the girls, I can't quite remember. What you notice is that there is a description happening here of Curly, and then it carries on over here, although there's a little bit of a dialogue beginning. But notice, look, we just come in, said George, let the big guy talk. Notice it didn't say said, because we know it's Curly. Lenny twists with embarrassment. George says, suppose he doesn't want to talk. It's non-standard. George said, comma, capital letter, suppose. He doesn't want to talk. Curly lashed his body around. By Christ, he's got to talk when he spoke to. And here, what's happened, because there's a description here, notice there's a full stop. They just added what he said at the end. We traveled together, said George Coley. Oh, so it's that way. No, he said. Okay, so what I'm trying to show you is moving the plot along. What's happening? Well, there is an interaction with Curly, okay? And the plot is trying to demonstrate that Curly is a bit aggressive. So it not only does it move the plot along where they are introduced to this new character, but they also have a conversation and you get characterization. You get the idea that George is assertive. You get the idea that Curly is aggressive. And you even get the idea that Lenny is vulnerable. Lenny was looking helplessly to George. And then later when they say when George says to Lenny, you can say something if you want. All he says is, I've just got it here. We just come in, said Lenny softly. So that comes across very gentle in this extract. So that's the second one. Have we got any more? I think there's a third example. If I just scroll that down. George and Lenny making conversation. So Lenny looked timidly over to him. George noticed the question. Short. Yeah, what do you want? No, he said. Where are we going, George? No, he said. The little man jerked down the brim of his hat and scowled over at Lenny. So you forgot that already, did you? I've got to tell you again, do I? Jesus Christ. And then he swears. I forgot, Lenny said softly. I tried not to forget. Honest to God, I did, George. So this is the interrupted here, number 3. I forgot. I tried not. Sorry, this is the number 4. And the number 4 is the one where there's 2 separate sentences. If you look carefully, I forgot that one has to be there anyway, Lenny said. But look, there's your full stop because it's one sentence and then capital letter, although you have to have capital letter when you say I anyway. Tried not to forget. Honest to God, I did, George. Okay, but what I'm trying to show you, there are two separate sentences here, so they're mixing it up. Okay, I'll tell you again. I ain't got nothing to do. Might just as well spend all my time telling you things and then you forget them. And I tell you again. Tried and tried, said Lenny, but it didn't do no good. I remember about the rabbits, George. The hell with the rabbits. So what you're having here is you're getting a relationship between George and Lenny that's building up. You're getting the understanding that Lenny keeps forgetting things and George is getting frustrated with having to remind him. And also you're introduced to this whole subplot about Lenny's obsession with rabbits. Um, all that through 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, let's say 13, 14, about 15 or so lines, you're getting a really strong characterization. Now imagine if you did something like this in your story, but you really need to have obviously a good plot. But if you have a section about that long of dialogue, where you're moving the plot along, but also building relationships, and I would suggest two people, then and I would also suggest different types of people. Make them sound different. Don't make them sound the same. Otherwise, you can't tell one apart from the other. That's weak. Each person should be their own character. Make them distinct. Okay. The last example I will give you is George and Lenny conversation about a mouse. That's the famous one. Let me just get rid of these dots. George looked sharply at him. What'd you take out of your pocket? Ain't a thing in my pocket, Lenny said cleverly. That's ironic. Notice the use of adverbs. I know there ain't. You got it in your hand. What you got in your hand? Hiding it. I ain't got nothing, George. Honest. Come on, give it here. Lenny held his closed hand away from George's direction. It's only a mouse, George. A mouse? A live mouse? Just a dead mouse, George. I didn't kill it, honest. I found it. I found it dead. Give it here, said George. Oh, leave me have it, George. Give it here. Notice the imperious style of talking there. Lenny closed the hand, slowly obeyed. George took the mouse and threw it across the pool to the other side among the brush. What you want a dead mouse, anyways? Okay, so what you're getting here is a conversation again, different types of sentences, exclamations, questions. There's also italics there. I wouldn't suggest italics when you're doing your exam. But yeah, and then occasionally no he said's. And don't forget the adverbs on some of those sentences. So I hope that was useful. So this video was focusing more specifically on dialogue, looking at the different types. Um, try to see what you can do with that, inshallah. Hope that was useful. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.